Hey everyone, and welcome to Phlearn. My name is Aaron Nace, and I'm so excited to be sharing this special project with you. As you might have noticed, we had a slight change of scenery here. I'm actually at my house, bundled up, safe, and I'm wishing you health and love. We're gonna be creating a composite fantasy image together called Bakster. Now, I photographed this a couple of years ago, and it's one of my favorite images that I've ever made, and I thought, well, this is a great time for us to focus in our creative energies and work on our project together. So we've got a relatively advanced composite photo that we're gonna be creating throughout several weeks together. So in today's video, we're gonna be building our background, literally changing day into night and matching multiple different exposures to make it look like it's the same scene. And then in our next section, we're gonna be adding Bakster into our image. All of the download assets, including sample images, raw files, as well as Photoshop brushes, are available completely for free. If you haven't already done so, head over to Phlearn.com. You can follow the link on your screen or the description right down below. You can download all of the sample images and assets so you can follow along with this tutorial. I'm excited for you to join me on the journey of creating Bakster. So we're starting off here in Photoshop. We're gonna go to File and down to Open. And we're gonna go ahead to our download folder. You're gonna see you've got brushes. We're including the PSD for this so you can open up that Photoshop file and see everything we've done, kind of dissect it. And we've got our sample images. We've got JPEGs and DNG raw images. So we're gonna be working with the raw images here. Now they're gonna be a little bit more intensive on your computer. They're a little bit larger files. So if you find that your computer maybe is struggling to keep up with these larger files, you can always use the JPEGs that are included as well. So let's go to our raw images, and we're just gonna go ahead and shift click all of the images and open them up. Now, because we're in Photoshop, they're gonna open up into our camera raw editor. So I've got all these different images we're gonna be using to create one final photograph. So you can see some of these images already have some adjustments that I've made to them. And those are gonna be already embedded into these files. That's a huge advantage of working with your raw editors. You can change things like your highlight level, shadow level, exposure, and even white balance non-destructively. And you have a lot more control over those things than you would in Photoshop, for instance. So we're gonna be opening up all of these into Photoshop as raw files. So let's go ahead through the settings you'll need to know to bring these into Photoshop. So down here on the very bottom of Camera Raw, you see this little line of text. Go ahead and click on that, and we want to make sure we're working in our color space is going to be Adobe RGB 1998. Our depth, we're going to be using 16 bits per channel. And down here at the bottom where it says Open in Photoshop as Smart Objects, that one is actually super important, okay? This is gonna allow us to get back into our Camera Raw editor at any time. So make sure you have this one checked. Let's hit okay there. And then right down here, it should say Open Objects, okay? Because we wanna open these as smart objects. So for now, we're just gonna click on the first image, hold Shift and click on the last image so they're all selected. And this is gonna say Open Objects, so we're gonna go ahead and hit Open Objects. There we go. So as long as you've got smart objects checked, it'll say Open Objects, and you're gonna see how useful it is to be able to get back into our Camera Raw editor at any point in time. So my images are opening up here in Photoshop. I'm gonna hit Control or Command minus a couple times to just zoom out of here. You might have your images open up in tabs, and that's totally okay. My goal here is just to put all of these different images into the same document. Okay, and then we're gonna organize them once they're in the same document. So I like to just put one document here, use my move tool up here on the top left. You can hit V for your move tool. And we're gonna hold Shift and click and drag from one image to another. There we go, and then close down that image. So let's just bring all these. Again, my goal is just to pull all of these images together into the same document. There we go, including Mr. Bakster himself. And we're gonna hit F for full screen. Okay, now we've got a little bit of organization to do here. So let's go ahead and group Bakster with itself. Go ahead and name that group. You can hit Control or Command G to group layers together. Now we've got a few different images we're going to be pulling together. You'll see that some of these basically look like they're in the same scene. And then we have this image here, Bakster 02, and this is a totally different scene, but we're going to be compositing this together with these other images here. So we're going to take this Bakster 02, I'm going to bring this to the top, there we go, right up there, and group that with itself. Okay, and we're going to call this right side. There we are. And then I'm going to take the rest of the images. So this is going to be 03, 04, 05, and 06. Shift click on all those, Control or Command G, and we're going to call this left side. Okay, so for now we can go ahead and make Bakster and our right side invisible. Our left side, we're going to go ahead and pull all these together. And then I want Bakster 04 on the bottom, and you can make all these invisible. So this is what we're starting with. So let's go ahead and get started. Now this is a little bit on the advanced side, I must tell you there, but don't worry, you got this, we can do it together, it's gonna be great. So we're starting off with Bakster 04 on the very bottom, okay? And I wanna bring in some different pieces of the puzzle. So this was photographed in a Chicago alley right around sunset, and we see there's a car actually coming in to the scene. This was not a planned thing. This car just happened to be coming in, and they're going to open up that garage door to the left, and that's this Bakster 05. Okay, I thought the garage door opening was actually a pretty cool effect, so I want to have that open garage in my final photo. So what we're going to do is turn that layer on. So let's turn Bakster 05 on. Then I'm going to click on my layer mask. In fact, I'm going to hold Alt or Option and click on that layer mask, which makes a black layer mask. Makes everything invisible. Now we're just going to use our brush tool. So we'll just use a standard brush. So hit B for the brush tool. Okay, I have a brush that I made called Aaron's brush. I'll include that as well. You can just use a soft round brush if you'd like. And we're just going to paint white on our layer mask right over here where the garage is. Okay, again, my goal here is just to make the garage door look like it's open. There we go. Now these files might not be in the exact perfect place, so you can use your move tool and simply move them up and down. And you can hit the up, down, left, right arrows as well. Okay, I'm gonna hit the right arrow and up a couple times. There we go. That looks pretty good there. Now, there are some auto align tools in Photoshop, but because we're using smart objects, unfortunately, those are not available to us. But the advantages of using smart objects greatly outweigh the auto align tools. So look at that, we just opened that garage door. Boom, pretty cool, huh? Now we're gonna take this Bakster 06, and this image basically is gonna be used to remove this car from the background and get rid of Bakster as well, because Bakster is going to be in the final image, but he's going to be like 15 feet tall off on the side of the image, and he's going to be leaning against this garage on the right hand side. So for now, we're just going to make this layer visible here. So Bakster 06, let's hold again Alt or Option and click on that layer mask, and then we're going to use our brush tool to paint white on the layer mask to simply remove the car that he was, that car was not a planned part of this photo shoot. It just happened to be pulling in, we're just shooting this in an alley. So you don't get to control whether cars come in and out of an alley. Well, I guess if you shut it down, you could, but this was done run and gun style. We'll say that. Alrighty, there we go. And you just want to make sure that you don't mask out your subject, but there we go. Look at that. Very quick and easy removal of the background there. And then if I need to use my move tool to kind of line this up a little bit, I can do that as well. There we go. Let's just pop that to the left a little bit. Okay. That looks really good. So already we've removed Bakster in that car from the background, as well as opened the garage door. Now, this light that's right above our subject, that's actually a strobe light, So to give you an idea of the lighting for this scene, we have one light that was just on a light stand up here, and that's giving our subject a bit of a backlight, which helps separate him from the background image. You know, it just gives it a little bit more of a visual separation. And then we've got a light here in the foreground. You can see we've got a sandbag and a big tall light stand here. And there was a large softbox up here on the left side of the image, and that's what's lighting our subject's face. Okay, so we wanted to make sure that our subject is well lit, but I actually don't really want this big old bright light in our image. I find it to be a little bit distracting. So what I will do oftentimes is take a picture with the light and one without the light. And we actually do have that picture right here, but this was shot right at sunset and we were kind of like in a rush because I wanted to make sure the light balance was perfect. So this photo with that light removed, you can see it's lighter. It basically looks like day. So what I want to do is I want to edit this image Bakster 03 to make it look like it's night. And we can do that with our Adobe Camera Raw editor. It's super cool. So what we're going to do is, because we open this as a smart object, we can double click right here. Boom, double click right here on your thumbnail. And I'm just going to take my exposure and drag that way down. Now don't worry about getting it perfect just yet. We can go in and change these settings at any time. We're going to bring our shadow levels up a little bit, and I'm going to bring my black levels up a little bit too. And you can see how it's starting to look more like night. So let's hit OK there, and it's going to automatically update. So now, just like we did before, I'm going to hold Alt or Option and click on that layer mask. It makes a black layer mask. And then I'm going to use my brush tool to paint white on my layer mask just where I want this to be visible. Okay, there we go. We're going to continue painting white on the layer mask just in this area. Again, my goal is to remove that light. There we go. And that's looking really, really nice there. I'm going to bring down the flow of my brush to about 20% so we get a nice natural fade from one to another. There we are. So you can see I've removed my light and it looks pretty realistic. There we go. I want to remove the reflection from that street light as well. It's looking pretty realistic, but I need to make my sky darker to match the rest of the scene. So what we're going to do is double click right here, go back into our Adobe Camera Raw. I want to make my sky darker. So we're going to choose our settings right over here. We're going to go to our Hue Saturation and Luminance adjustments. Okay, now you can choose to just bring down your aquas or blues, but you can also use this targeted adjustment tool. There we go. And you can choose here Hue, Saturation, and Luminance. This will change based on where what menu you have chosen. But with my targeted adjustment tool, I can actually just click here on the sky and drag this down, and you're going to see it's going to take those colors and it's going to make them a little bit darker. Okay, so let's do that right over here. And literally, I'm just trying to make that sky darker. So let's hit OK and see how it blends together now. All right, and that's starting to look pretty good. Let's go ahead and zoom out. I'm going to use my brush tool. Again, just a nice, large, soft edge brush. And I just want everything to blend together nice and smooth. There we go. I still think we could bring our exposure down just a little bit. So let's double click here. And I'm just going to take my exposure for the whole image and bring that down. And we'll bring our contrast down a little bit too as well. And you can see what was a day image starting to look like night. This is such a cool ability to be able to do this in our Camera Raw editor. It gives us a lot more versatility than if we had, for instance, just been using a curves adjustment layer to try to get this done. All right, and there we go. You can see it looks very similar to the exposure of the rest of the image, right? There we go. Let's go ahead and brighten that up. So basically this image was pretty much daylight and we're making it look like night, which also helps us to remove that, that little flash there, which is super, super cool. All right, so here you can start to see the power of raw editing. And already we're doing great. So this is where we started. Pretty cool for just a couple of changes, right? So we open that garage, remove that car, and then remove that light. So this is just a great little lesson. Whenever I'm doing these types of composites, you know, keep your camera on the tripod. It's okay to move some things around. And let's say you want a light on your subject, you can bring in a softbox and light your subject, and then just take another picture with that softbox out of there, blend those two exposures. As you can see, even if they're not perfectly like exposed the same, you can make those adjustments in Camera Raw and then bring everything together. So whenever I'm doing a scene like this, especially if I know I'm going to do a complicated composite, I like to take, you know, try to keep that camera in the same place and then take as many pictures as you can with different variables. And that allows you a lot of choices in post-production. Okay, now we do have a light stand here on the left-hand side. We're just going to remove that with a clone stamp tool later. There we are. So let's go ahead and close our left side group. We're looking really cool. I really like the light in this photo already. It's a very interesting mix between daylight and kind of dusk. The next thing we want to do is bring in our right side image. And for this, let's go ahead and open that group. There we are. We're going to go ahead and mask out the left side of this photograph. Okay, so let's click on our layer mask here. I'm going to go to my marquee tool and we're just going to make a selection right around here. Let's go right to about there. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to adjust this in a little bit. And then on our layer mask, we're going to go to edit and down to fill, and we're going to fill this with black. There we go. And deselect by hitting Control or Command D. So now what I want to do is use my move tool. So we're going to click on V for the move tool, and I want to move this right around. We'll bring our opacity down a little bit. I want to move this to about the place where everything starts to come together. And my goal here, I've got a couple goals. You can see the alley kind of ends right here. Okay. I want that to line up with this vertically, because if you put it too tall or too high or too low, you can see it's not going to look that realistic. So I want to kind of bring that together. And then I want basically the telephone pole. You can see there's the edge of a telephone pole. I want that to match up with the edge of this building here. So it's going to give me a nice even transition from this photograph to that other photograph. And I know right now they don't really look good. It doesn't look real, but it will in a second. So now what we're going to do is hit C for the crop tool. And up here at the top, you have an option for delete crop pixels. Make sure that is not checked. Okay, so if it looks like this with the checkbox, uncheck it. So it should look like this, no checkbox. We're just going to extend our scene. Oops, there we go. Just click and drag this boop, to the right a little bit and hit that enter, or you can hit the little checkbox up there. Okay, so now it's time to start blending these together. Now we're going to bring our opacity up a little bit, and on our layer mask, I'm going to use my brush tool to paint black. So let's just paint black on our layer mask here with a nice large soft edge brush, because I want this to be a smooth transition from one image to another. That's my goal here. Make this nice and smooth. There we go. Now, as we can see, our exposures don't line up at all, do they? It very much looks like we have two separate photographs, but in just a few minutes, it's going to look like we have one photo. It's really, really cool. And we're able to do this all with the Camera Raw editor. Now, if you don't get your layer masks exactly correct, don't worry about it. You can change that at any time. Okay, this looks good. I'm gonna hit Control or Command T. Let's go ahead and bring our control point here. We're just gonna make this a little bit larger. There we go. And I'm gonna rotate it a tiny bit to the right. That's just going to fill our entire scene there. Okay, and you can see we can continue to move it, but we want it to be about in the right place. And that's looking pretty good. Now, I know our telephone wires and things like that don't exactly line up, but that's not really that big of a deal, especially right now in the process. Mostly, I just want to get it about to the right place. Okay, so it's looking pretty good, right? If you discard the color and light information, the composite actually looks pretty good. Let me maybe rotate a little bit more to the right here. There we go. Cool, that's looking great. So now my goal is to take this photo and make it look like it's the similar color and lighting to the photo on the left. And they were taking maybe 30 or 45 minutes apart, but because it was dusk, you know, very late at night, we have, you know, a big change in light. So rather than trying to do complicated masking with the trees and the wires and everything, what we're gonna do is go into Adobe Camera Raw right here in Photoshop, and I'm just gonna make this image, I'm gonna change the exposure and some colors, and we're gonna make it look like the image on the left. So let's go ahead and double click right here on the thumbnail. Again, this is back in Camera Raw. So you remember earlier where we had you click right here and then choose Open in Photoshop as Smart Objects? That's super important because that's what allows us to get into Adobe Camera Raw by double clicking on the thumbnail. Okay, so what we're gonna go ahead and do is let's click on our little menu. I'm gonna go to Camera Raw Defaults. That's just gonna be straight out of camera. Okay, let's enable our lens corrections again because they turn that off. And now we're just gonna take our exposure and bring it way down. Okay, we're gonna take our shadow levels way up and we're gonna take our blacks way up. Okay, so again, my goal is to take this sky and make it darker to try to match the sky on the left. Okay, so starting to look good. Now you're gonna notice my sky isn't looking exactly right and my ground is a little bit too dark. I'm gonna focus on one area first, being the sky, and then we're gonna focus on the ground. So I've got a couple tips for you when you're matching these things together. These are really, really helpful. The first thing we're gonna do is create a black and white adjustment layer. Boom. Black and white adjustment layer. Now, what does this help us with? If I look at this image in black and white, let's take a look at the sky here. What that tells me is that the top part of this sky needs to get a little bit darker and the bottom part of the sky needs to be a little bit lighter. I can see that here in black and white. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm gonna double click here on our image. I'm gonna go to my graduated filter right here. Okay, let's go ahead and we're just going to reset these local correction settings. So what did we just say? The top of the sky needs to be darker and the bottom needs to be lighter. So I'm gonna click and drag here from the top down. There we are, just like that. And we're gonna bring our exposure down. Okay, now I'm gonna click and drag from the bottom up, just like this, and we're gonna bring our exposure up. There we are. So let's go ahead and hit OK and see how that looks. So you can see, bam, look at that. Cool change, right? So here's the before and the after, right? Starting to look a lot more similar. Notice I'm not even worried about color just yet. Let's just get our light levels right first and then we can work on color. We want to make our ground a little bit brighter, right? It's not looking just right just yet. So we double click there again, go back to our graduated filter. We click on this one here, okay? And we bring our exposure up a little bit more and I'm going to bring this a little bit higher. There we are, and we'll hit OK. Now again, it doesn't have to be perfect. See, it's a tiny bit too bright. Let's go back there and go back to our graduated filters. This one I actually want to make a tiny bit darker. And this one we want to make a little bit darker as well. Now, again, it doesn't have to be perfect. You just want to get it pretty close. And that's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and make this center area a little bit brighter here. We'll double click there. I'm going to go to a radial filter now. We're going to click and drag out there and we're going to make it a little bit brighter. All right. And there we go. We're looking pretty good. Now, here's my general advice with this type of compositing. If you can get it to look good in black and white, then you've got a great chance of making your image look good as a whole. But if it doesn't look good in black and white, don't even start working on color just yet. So first you get your black and white looking good. That just takes care of your light levels. And then once your light levels are good, then you want to focus on your color. So at this point, looking pretty good, right? Not 100% perfect, but I'm pretty happy with that. Now what we want to do is go ahead and turn this black and white layer off and we can see, oh, you know what? Our colors aren't exactly right, but we know that our light levels are pretty good. So I've got another tip for you. What we're gonna do is grab another solid color adjustment layer. Okay, we're just gonna go right up to a bright red. Now I'm gonna change the layer blend mode here from normal down to hue. Okay, bear with me on this because I know it's a little bit like, what are you doing right now? But when I set this to hue, what I see in my image, because now it's all the same hue, it's basically all red. So what I'm seeing is actually relative saturations, right? Like the sky on the left-hand side is not very red, but the sky on the right-hand side is very red. So what this is actually telling me, because there's the same hue now, like this red layer is literally just making them all the same hue. So what this is actually telling me is that the sky on the right side is more saturated than the sky on the left. And my ground on the right side is actually less saturated than the ground on the left. Pretty interesting stuff here. Now I know it's a little bit of like a right? But we've got these cool layers like this black and white layer and this layer. They kind of help us along our journey to match these different images. Alrighty, so what I need to do now is I need to take the saturation of the sky on the right-hand side. I need to bring the saturation down, and I'm gonna try to bring the saturation of the ground up. So how do we do that? Well, we just double click right here, okay? We're gonna go to our Hue Saturation Luminance. Let's go to Saturation. I'm gonna go to my targeted adjustment tool right here, and I'm gonna click on my sky, and we're just gonna bring our saturation down, okay? And we're gonna click on our ground and bring it up. There we go. Let's hit okay. Actually, the ground we'll just leave where it is because it was doing some weird stuff. But let's look at the sky and hit okay. Oh, look at that. It's starting to match much better, right? So let's go ahead and turn this red layer off and look at that. So here, if I just do the before and the after, look at that. That is just a saturation change, okay? This is this is more saturated and this is less saturated. And look how well it matches. In fact, I think I made it a little bit too much. I did a little bit too desaturated, so we're just gonna add a little bit of saturation back. And let's hit okay. And look at that, it's starting to match a lot better. This is such a great technique because when you look at the image off the bat, it's tough to know, is your image too bright or too dark? Is it too yellow or too blue? Is it too saturated? There's so many different variables, and that's why we have these layers I call check layers that help you eliminate some of the variables. So by putting the black and white layer on there, it just allows you to focus on your light levels. When you put this color fill layer and you have this set to saturation, what that does is it allows you to just see your relative saturations. So now, just in this area, I'm gonna lower the saturation of this photo. So let's double click here, okay? We're gonna go back to our graduated filter, and look, I already have one right here that's targeting the area that I want. So right here, I'm gonna just click on that one, and we're gonna take our saturation and make that a little bit lower in that area. Let's hit okay there. And see how that looks. You can see we got a saturation change. Looks like it's not enough. So I just go double click there, back to my graduated filter, and we go back to saturation. Now again, you could do this with like curves adjustment layers and hue saturation adjustment layers, but being able to go back into Adobe Camera Raw is actually a lot more powerful. And look how well they match now. I'm just gonna bring my graduated or my radial filter, we're just gonna make that a little bit larger. And check that out. That's a pretty nice match. So here in black and white, we're looking pretty good. Here in our relative saturation levels, we're looking pretty good as well. Now my ground, maybe we want to make this a little bit more saturated. Okay, so we're going to double click here. There we are. We're going to use an adjustment brush, and I'm just going to paint here on our image with our adjustment brush. Let's just turn our mask on so we can see what we're doing here. There we are. We're just going to paint there. Just choose a large soft edge brush. And then we're gonna bring our saturation up a little bit with that. So let's hit okay there. All right, and we can see the saturation went up a little bit brighter. Maybe we'll make that a little bit, there we go. Maybe we'll make it a little bit warmer as well. Let's go back to our adjustment brush and bring our color temperature up a little bit. Let's bring our saturation up just a little bit more as well. All right, so look at that now. The saturation on the right-hand side is starting to match the saturation on the left. And I think it's a little bit too bright, so let's go in here and go back to our adjustment brush, click on this one, and then we're just gonna bring our exposure down just a little bit. It's all about matching. Okay, pretty close. Not perfect, but looking pretty good. So what we've done is match this in our black and white levels. Not perfect, but pretty good. And then we've matched it in our relative saturations. Okay, so now really the only thing left is basically our color temperature, right? When it comes to color, you've got hue, okay? And hue is just like red, blue, green. You've got saturation, and that's the concentration of your color. And then you've got luminance, and that's how bright or dark it is. So we've already taken care of our luminance, the bright and dark. We've already taken care of our saturation. Really what's just left is our hue. And we can do that in Camera Raw, but you can also do that right here. So let's go ahead and show you how to do this. We're gonna create a new layer. Let's grab a hue/saturation adjustment layer. Okay, now I'm gonna clip this to my right side image. And when I clip this, let's just change this. You'll see what it does is it only allows you to edit that image, right? So that's the cool thing about being able to do this with what's called a clipping mask, because if this is not clipped, look, it's gonna start changing everything. So go ahead and click on this little icon right here, or you can right click and go to create or release clipping mask. See if it's a release, it's gonna change the color of your whole image. But if you make a clipping mask by right clicking and say create clipping mask, boom, now it only affects this layer that it's clipped to. So what we're gonna do is start matching the hue from one image to another. And guess what? This has its own layer mask, right? So for instance, I'm gonna focus on the sky first. So let's go ahead and get the sky where we want it. I'm gonna invert the layer mask on that. And then I'm gonna just paint white on the layer mask here. Okay. So this allows me to just get the hue of that part of the sky to match, right? And then I can just kind of make my adjustments here and get it to match with that image on the left. I can even change things like my saturation if I wanted to. Like, you know, obviously we already matched our saturation with Adobe Camera Raw, so I don't really have to do that. But there we go. You can see our hues are starting to match much better as well. How cool is that? So the skies are looking really good. Okay, now what we're gonna do is take our, there we go, let's go back to our brush tool and our layer mask. I'm just gonna fade that out a little bit more. Now we wanna do the same thing with the ground. So I'm gonna grab a hue saturation adjustment layer, clip it, so let's click on our clipping mask here, and I wanna start adjusting the ground to look like the ground on the left. There we go, and that looks pretty good, right? It changed it from this, looked a little bit too red. There we go, and now that fits. And you can invert the layer mask and then just paint it visible here on the ground. All right, I think the ground here just needs to be a little bit darker. So let's double click here. Okay, go back to our adjustment brush and there we go. We're just gonna bring our exposure down a little bit, because I want to match one side of the street to the other. And that's looking pretty dang good. Now, there are definitely some things that we can do to help them match a little bit better. But right now, I gotta say, that's looking pretty good. So let's see here in black and white, we're looking pretty good. And here as far as our hue is or saturation's looking, we're looking pretty good as well. So now let's go ahead, I'm gonna turn the black and white on again. We're gonna do a couple curves adjustment layers just to do some fine tuning here. Most of our adjustments I wanna do in Adobe Camera Raw because it's super powerful. And then for the fine tune adjustments, then we can use hue saturation and things like curves or levels. So let's go to our curves. Again, I wanna clip this, so let's click on our clipping mask. So I only wanna affect the right side image there. Okay, we're just gonna bring, actually I'm gonna take my light levels here. We're just gonna bring those down. Then I'm gonna invert my layer mask on this because I really only need it to be visible like right there, right? And look how well that starts to blend together now. It's almost like magic. There we are. Now I'm gonna take the same, we're gonna do another curves adjustment layer. We're gonna go ahead and clip this and make it a tiny bit brighter. Okay, let's invert that layer mask and make it just visible there. See how there's the before you can kind of tell, right? It gets darker here and then lighter, but now looks like a smooth transition. Okay, we're gonna do one more here. So a curves adjustment layer. Make sure to clip it again. There we go, make it darker. We're gonna invert the layer mask and then paint with white right over there. There we go. So here in black and white, I mean, look at that. It's looking really, really good. It looks like one photo, but it's not, right? Very clearly, it's not one photo. Okay, and now here in color, let's go ahead and take a look at this. We're looking really good as well. Now, there are a lot of different things you can do with your color here. One more thing that we're going to do here is I'm gonna create another layer. Okay, we're gonna clip this. So we're gonna right click and say create clipping mask. And I'm gonna go to my brush tool and just sample this color and paint right over here. There we go. And then I can just change this from normal down to hue. Alrighty. There we go. You can see I've painted a little bit too much, but that's okay. We just put a layer mask on this and then fade it out. And then here, look at that. We basically have an exact hue match from one image to another. Isn't this incredibly cool? Now the right side image here, I want to be a little bit more like yellowy here. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to create a new layer. Go ahead and clip it. I'm going to grab this orangey color here and paint it right over top of these buildings because I want a little bit more of that orangey color. We're going to change this from normal down to hue. Okay, and then we're going to lower the opacity of that subtly and put a layer mask on this and then mask it away from the building or from the sky because I really just wanted to affect my buildings, right? Wow, look at that. Really? It looks like one image, doesn't it? It's amazing. So all we have to do now is go in here and work on our layer mask and just make sure that everything lines up with our layer mask. There we go. So we're just gonna paint this in here. There we go. Looks like one image. There we go. I just basically need my telephone pole right here. Oh, I'm just painting black and white on my layer mask here. And that's what's allowing me to, here we go. Let's do a smaller brush here. Just painting black and white on my layer mask here. And that's what's allowing me to bring these two images together. All right, we got this little barrel looking thing over here. Okay, and then I just need to make this a little bit darker here. So easy to do, just grab a curves adjustment layer, clip that, and we'll just bring our light levels down. Right to about there. Let's invert that layer mask by hitting Control or Command I. And then we're just gonna paint white on the layer mask right here. So we're just blending these two exposures together. There we go. And without any real magic, I mean, we've got some Photoshop magic together. We've done a great job blending those exposures together. So now let's go ahead and save this. Shift Command S. Okay, we're just gonna go ahead and save this here in our PSD. Save this out as Bakster. And we are looking great. So we're almost done with this. Now these two layers here, wasn't that cool? This black and white adjustment layer and this hue layer. We're gonna go ahead and group those, double click here and call these check layers because we're gonna come back to them and use them with Bakster. So check this out. Let's just make all those layers invisible. I know it's like a lot of layers, but the amount of things we were able to do with this. I mean, I don't know if you remember this original layer. In fact, I'm gonna create a new smart object via copy to show you what this original layer looked like. We're just gonna go ahead and reset to the camera raw default. So hit OK there. Okay, this is literally what it looked like straight out of camera. Does not look like it was gonna fit, right? But check it out. We went ahead and did some exposure adjustments, some color adjustments, and then came in here with all these little settings here, and each one of these helped bring everything together. And by the final, man, it looks like we have two sides of the same street. Such a cool effect. So all we have to do to finish that off, let's just create a new layer in here. We're just gonna remove some of these little wires here. So hit J for your spot healing brush tool. There we go. Now you can remove these wires if you want, which is what I'm gonna choose to do right now. Or you could go in here and there we go. We gotta remove that tree too, because it's like a ghost tree. Ooh, ghost tree. It's like not scary at all. It's just a tree. There we go. We're just gonna remove some of this stuff, and you can add your own wires if you want to as well. There we are. So everything is nice. That looks great. We just need to patch this together. So let's go ahead and remove that to clean it up, right? Now we'll create a new layer. S for the clone stamp tool. You wanna make sure you sample the current and below, okay? And then I'm just gonna sample this little wire. We'll just paint it right over there. Change our layer blend mode from normal to darken, and then check this out. I can just move it right over there. Boom, right? And then it's like, okay, cool. Well, it's not exactly the right place, but look at that. We just moved it right over there, and all of our wires make sense again. Can you believe that? Right? This, what could have been a problem, that could have destroyed our entire composite. We just spot healed out a couple wires and extended some couple wires with a clone stamp tool. And then all of a sudden, look at this. Our background looks fantastic. Oh, I'm so excited about this tutorial. It's really coming together. I hope you enjoyed this so far. We've got a lot of really great things coming up together. So our next section, which is gonna be our next video we release, we're gonna be bringing in Bakster. So let's take a look at Bakster. Now keep in mind, he's photographed in the studio, okay? And we're gonna make him look like he's 15 feet tall behind this building. So we're gonna be cutting him out of the background. We've got a really cool custom brush. We're gonna be painting hair. Can you believe that? Painting hair in Photoshop, and it's gonna look completely realistic. So we're gonna put Bakster in this image, and then to finish it all off, we're gonna give the whole photograph beautiful color tone. We're gonna make it blues and purple and really bring the dusk feeling. We're gonna add some light into the flashlight and clean up the image as a whole. It's gonna be really, really great. So I can't wait to see you in our next section, and I'm so happy to be able to join you together to create this really fun project. Alrighty, thank you so much. We'll see you in the next video. Bye everyone.